So as you're constructing a 3-page, 4-page comic autobiography, we've talked about thinking about laying out pages in terms of what the panels will look like. We've also talked about what might be good to include in the panels to make sure that your pictures are telling the story as well as your dialogue. The last thing we're going to talk about briefly is how to draw these panels and why do artists make the choices they make so that you can make a good informed choice. These are 2 pictures of Art Spiegelman. One is a drawing he did of himself wearing his mouse mask that he doesn't actually have. And the other one is a photograph of Art Spiegelman. Now, he's a very gifted draftsman. He could draw himself naturalistically and realistically if he wanted to. But he opted, when doing his book Mouse, for a pared down, simplified style of drawing. He felt that that was the best way to convey his story. He also turned his characters into animals because his story depends on being able to tell, all right, the people of different ethnic extractions from each other because it is set during the Holocaust. Now, when it comes to drawing in a particular style, there isn't a right way to do this in comics. However, very often with sequential art, because we want to read an image, a cartoonist will choose to draw in a somewhat simplified manner. You can do this, okay? And when I say simplified, I don't mean unsophisticated. I just mean with some details pared down. In the drawing on the left-hand side here of a rabbit by the 15th century artist Albrecht Dürer, he has taken an everything you can possibly see approach, drawing every single hair of this rabbit, okay, drawing the detail in the eyes, etc. By contrast, Art Spiegelman focuses on the gesture of his characters and on the most significant details. For example, glasses, the gesture of a raised or an arched eyebrow to show a sense of happiness and joy, simplified movements of the body. Okay, he's doing this because he needs the drawings to serve his story. So I'm going to just show you a couple of examples of how artists have drawn themselves as cartoons so that you can make a determination about how you would like to draw your own story. As I mentioned before, he draws his characters in Mouse as different animals. The Nazis are always drawn as cats, playing on the old cats chase mice stereotype. The mice are the Jewish characters. The Americans are drawn as canines or dogs. Okay, so that's an easy way to tell in a story that depends on the ethnic extraction of each of the characters. It's an easy way to distinguish right away rather than having to explain every time you draw a person. This person was Jewish, this person was Polish, so forth. There is a photo of Reina Talgemeyer on the left and her drawing of herself as an 11-year-old on the right-hand side. Notice the sort of extreme stylization. Her face becomes rubbery in her drawing, where even the eyes are these kind of sloping shapes that are kind of falling off her face almost. Her mouth is a big, rubbery kind of opening. And this approach to drawing her character suits her storytelling very, very well. It's an easy way to show the awkwardness of a preteen girl tripping on the sidewalk. It's an easy way to tell a clear story. No extraneous details. These are some photos and some self-portraits by the artist Robert Crum. He has a tendency to draw himself as an unappealing kind of warts and all figure with a very heavily detailed pen style. All right, you can see a lot of cross-hatching, a lot of kind of gnarly details, and they range from the cartoony somewhat to the very hyper-realistic. Here's another of some Robert Crum drawings. You can see he does a very, very detailed job of showing all the light and shadow, even drawing the reflections from his glasses, every wrinkle, every hair. All right, that's one way to approach, certainly, drawing yourself, especially if you're drawing an autobiographical comic. On the other end of the spectrum, this is the cartoonist John Porcellino. This is what he looks like in real life. This is a drawing he did of himself, trying to maximize his own attention to real appearance. But more interestingly, this is how he draws himself in most of his comics. He has weeded out all and any extraneous details, although we still can see his receding hairline, and we still see his glasses, even though they're not even connected in this image, and his several days growth of beard. Okay, whatever choice you make in terms of how you draw yourself in your own comic, it's fine as long as it is suited to the type of story you want to tell and to what kind of character you're portraying yourself as. This is the cartoonist Leela Corman, and she is doing a story, a reflection on her own PTSD, and in that story she draws herself sort of floating unconscious. So here's her self-portrait, and here trying to care or administer CPR, that's another self-portrait. And it's not altogether dissimilar from what she looks like in real life, but it's certainly not any attempt at a photographic representation. So the point is there's a broad spectrum of ways that you can show yourself depending on how you choose to draw, and they're all okay. You remember we talked about the books One Dirty Tree and My Hot Date by Noah Van Sciver. These are all self-portraits that Noah has drawn in various comics. They range from the sort of kind of realistic, super handsome attempt to the scruffy, nervous cartoonist at work. And this is a picture of what Noah actually looks like. Here's a couple of images of Noah. This is from My Hot Date, where he draws himself as a skinny, afroed teenager, and these are pictures of what he actually looks like with a mustache, so that when he draws himself with a mustache here, it's not unrealistic. Okay. Lastly, I'm going to show you Julia Wurtz. She does a series of autobiographical comics, or she did. I don't think she's doing them anymore. But again, notice how her stylized look is something that's easily repeatable, and we can recognize this character from panel to panel, even though she doesn't actually look like somebody with giant eyeballs, okay, and perfectly circular eyeballs at that, and a little bump for a nose. She is, in fact, a real person. But how she chooses to depict herself lends itself to her sort of self-deprecating stories, okay, and the stories she tells about her life as a young adult back in her 20s. So however you choose to depict yourself in your own autobiographical comic, okay, however simple or however complex you opt to draw yourself, remember that it should always be in the service of your story. Does your character need to look very simple? Does your character need to look very naturalistic? Do you want to follow drawing the egg and making your character look extremely realistic in every panel? That's an option, and there's a range of options in between. However you choose to draw yourself is going to be fine, provided that it suits the needs of the story. Are you telling a humorous story? Are you telling a lighthearted story? Do you want to have light drawings? Do you want your character to be sort of naturalistic looking so that we can identify with real historical situations? Or maybe just the opposite. Maybe a cartoon character should look somehow less representational. Maybe your self-portrait, okay, well, I suppose I should give this guy hair so that they match my two drawings. Or maybe your character needs to look a little bit more expressionistic, you know. Maybe you're drawing your character with big broad strokes, and this kind of simplified expressive approach, maybe that's good too. It all kind of depends on how and what type of story you choose to draw. So when you're thinking about drawing style, don't just revert to something that you automatically know, like maybe you read Smile and you want to draw like Reina Talgemeyer. That might be okay, but maybe definitely think about drawing in a way that is unique to you and that suits the needs of your story. So just to reiterate, all right, we've got 3 things to think about. Number 1, layout. How are you going to plan out your panels to tell the story that you want to make a thumbnail sketch, and then draw your panels to that size at the end. You don't need to use a ruler. They don't have to be perfectly straight lines. You can do this on a sheet of typing paper. You can do it in your sketchbook, however you want to do it. That's number 1, layout. Okay, number 2, storytelling. And this can be done on the same page as which you do your layouts. When you've laid out a thumbnail sketch for what you want your page to look like in terms of panel number and panel size, then you can start to put in little rough draft drawings. Where will your characters be? What will their action be? Will they be running? Will they be, this is a character who's running, allegedly. Will they be running down a street? Will they be jumping into a car and driving off at top speed? You know, I don't know. These are the things that you want to plan out and figure out as you're planning out your layout. So number 2, of course, would be what to include in the panels, what to include, and last but not least, how to draw. Pick a style of drawing that will make sense with your story. How simple or how complex do you want your drawings to be? Okay, so please consider these 3 things as you plan out and draw. Oh, he kind of looks like a ghost. Let's uncreepify him. There we go. Plan these things out carefully, lay them out, and do a rough draft. And then from that rough draft, little, could even be life size, these little pages that I've drawn here. They don't have to be big, 2 or 3 inches tall. You get a rough draft of a layout, and then from there you can draw finalized comic book pages that will tell your story. As far as materials go, use whatever you have, whatever paper you have in the house, whatever pens, pencils, or other marking materials you've got can be used to make sequential art. Don't let anybody tell you you need any special tools. Whatever you can make a drawing with, you can use to make sequential art. The only recommendation I have is that you do draw only on one side of the paper. You can have a ruler on hand if you want to keep your panel borders straight, but straight panel borders are not a requirement. If you want to draw them freehand, that's perfectly acceptable as well. Good luck, and I look forward to seeing any work that you do in the future. Thanks.